ask is about some of the other more exciting Bell games that you can recall.
Yeah, we're rolling.
Boy, we got too many. I don't.
Well, the helmet start. Is there footage of that?
I think we hit most of
Footage
them.
of those games?
Pardon me?
Is there footage of those games on tape?
Oh yeah,
games you're
somewhere.
talking-
Yeah.
Okay.
You know who would? Ken Owen has a lot of that now. He's going till March the 8th, but he's a university. He does all the releases and what have you. And then Bill Wagner would have it. And then I think you guys should take a look at that Monon ballad. It's awesome because it goes over the history.
Okay.
I mean, it's awesome. The words are in there too. I'll give you a copy of that. Let me make sure I do that right now. And there it is right here. I'm going to give that to you. Okay?
Let me get that.
Oh, we'll get it. Sorry.
Okay, now what you're going to ask me again? I don't know too many games. I mean, there don't. I just remember the key ones like in 2000 and 1981,
Okay.
and then the ones that we lost.
Brush over that one. Let's see.
Oh, there was another game that was I remember vividly was in our ball game where the week before we were accused of stealing signals, and that was a big story that hit the headlines there that we stole the signals. But basically, we went up to play the ball game, and in the first half, we had the ball 5 times, and we marched right down the field. They were so worried about us stealing signals. But we moved down the field 5 times in the first half and scored all 5 times. We were ahead at halftime, 35-0. And there was no stealing any signals. We were just calling the plays and going down the field. But the game, I think, ended up 42-7. And I do remember that ball game because of my accusation about stealing the signals. I was called before the ethics committee, and I remember facing that ethics committee and some big name coaches, Gary Barnett at Northwestern at the time and what have you, and I said, after 39 years of coaching, I can't believe that I'm facing this committee. And I proceeded to defend ourselves, and so we weren't accused of anything from that standpoint. But anyway, went by.
Tell us about the Monon Bell and the Mexican dignitary who tried to steal it.
Well, there's many thefts. I think there's a total of 8 thefts involved in the game. Only 2 that I remember, but going back in history in that ball game where a student displayed himself as a Mexican who was very interested in doing an exchange program with Mexico. And he asked the president, he heard about the Monon Bell and that he'd like to see the Monon Bell. And the president told him where it was and took him over to show it to him. And then the next day, of course, he was a student disguised from Wabash, and the next day other students came and they stole the bell. But that's the story on that particular time. Since I've been here in 1980, I can't remember the date on that, 1984, I'm not sure, okay. The one that I can remember, the 2 that I can remember was let me get the date on that and I'll start over, God darn it, on the 2 that I remember, because they're worth seeing, was 1988. Ooh, I didn't realize it was that recent. Okay, 1988 and 1998. Okay, the 2 times that I can remember where the bell was stolen from by Wabash students was in 1988. We had the bell in our possession in Lilly Center, and our #1 basketball team proceeded to beat Wabash, and I remember the individual ringing the bell during the whole game, which after that we took the dinger out of it, but actually he rang it the whole game, and it was getting on the students. So they hid in the building after the game, and that night they stole it. They disconnected the bolts on the bell, and they lowered it and took it out the back door, and that's when they stole it in 1988. And then in 1998, we placed the bell high on the wall. I mean, it was like 20 feet up on the wall on a platform, and we had it bolted in. And there was a Halloween dance. And after the dance, some Wabash students hid in the building also. We think they hid in the restrooms. And they came out. They even brought the big dolly over there. They had a dolly on the big ladder, and they actually lowered it down with a dolly off of a scaffold. They brought a scaffold over. They lowered it down and took it out the back door. And to this day, there's a bolt sitting up there on top of the platform, and those are those two I remember. So since then, after that theft, then we did put it in a secure space and wired it, so if they ever did try to steal it, we'd know instantly. And they did try to steal it after we did that, by the way, and they did get caught. And then, of course, naturally, the school turns in the students to the other school when that does occur. And that's what I can remember. But it is safe now, in a safe location. And I know the story about them, they put it at they have pledges watch it every day just about. But they got it also anchored in a very secure spot.
What's your personal stance on the thefts and the stealing of the bell?
Well, I think my stand on that is that, you know, I guess that's what causes some of the rivalry and the stories behind it. There's also one that we have to do a review on. That's the one where our own students, that was before my time here, where they buried the bell in the end zone, in the north end zone, and in fact they didn't dig it up until the day of the game, and they had trouble because the ground was frozen there. But you know, that's one of those where we hit it so they couldn't steal it from us, I guess. So that was the story behind that, and I think that just adds to the rivalry, and you can see how much everyone wants a possession of it. I know, because when you don't have it, it's an empty feeling until you get it back, or you have to wait the next year to win the game to return the Monon Bell back in your possession.
Yeah, I actually told you that I worked with a guy during the summer who he got community service for stealing the bell.
He did?
And I think it was the last time that
98?
Yeah. There was one time they didn't actually steal it; they got caught.
Okay, they got caught on it, so it's been since '98 when we had it. You might want to take a picture of that too, so you see where we keep it.
Tell us about any of your personal traditions involving the bell or the bell game. Just any of your personal traditions and stories.
My personal traditions in the game, you know, it begins, you know, the week of the game, after the 9th game, because that's always the last game of the year, and we remind them there's just one big game left. And I used to emphasize it quite a bit, and the intensity during the week, the practice was truly outstanding. We played the ballad quite a bit, even in the office area, because the Monon Ballad written, and it's written very neutral, but I'm not sure that Wabash uses it, but maybe because it's written by us, and the music's done by us, and the words are done by us, but actually it's very neutral. It does a great job of presenting the rivalry and the history of it. It's an awesome film, and so we play it in the office area during the week, but we definitely play that on Friday night before the ball game. I don't want to give all our secrets away here, so okay, but that's some of the things that we do. And of course, Thursday night's always a key night in football because that's the last night that you put on pads. So it's a culminating practice for the end of the year where you have the senior hit night. Most schools have that, so that's nothing that's unusual, except it's the last night, and it makes it more important for us because we have the Monon Bell, the last game of the year, every year. So it adds a little more interest or more intense to that last practice. Because here seniors have been playing together for 4 years, and that's their last football game in 99% of the cases. Maybe a few guys might get pro tryouts, but basically they're here to get a degree. And in my 23 years here, I've had them, all of them graduate but one individual, and that individual worked for his family, and he just had one course or something to do, one course and one paper due. And but other than that, you can say that most kids graduate at this level in 4 years and they get on with their careers. So the football career is over. So that's a very sentimental night and very emotional night, the last practice of the year. And that's true at all colleges, but here it just adds a little more because of the rivalry of the last Monon Bell game.
Can you tell us, oh yeah, good. And impressive that so many people graduate in only one student. Can you tell us about the picture that you have, the kind of tradition that you have?
Okay, the one tradition we do in the locker room that I started was when there's a beautiful picture we have of the bell that's roughly 3 feet by 4 feet that we have showing when we have possession of it as you enter the locker room. And if we don't have possession of the bell, then I always turn the picture around, so all we see is black. Okay, so that's just one of the traditions we have there. But it's really a special week because it's the last game of the year, last week of practice, and so it's intense because the rivalry is there, makes it much more intense.
Going with the seniors, how does it feel for the seniors who have won it 4 straight years, and how does it feel for the seniors who have lost?
How do the seniors feel in the last ball game? I assure you, it's just like a coach. It's a great feeling they have. They may have lost the 3 previous games, but if they win the last one, they'll always remember that one. It always leaves if you lose the last game, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And for those seniors, one year, there was a span, I should say, we won it 5 games in a row, and really it's a fantastic feeling to win it year after year. And I assure you that the alums, the football alums from that game, always remember, they always say that we won the bell 4 years in a row, and they brag about it, and you can see why. I mean, they have a lot of pride from the standpoint that they won all 4 years, which doesn't happen very often because the rivalry is very balanced on wins and losses. So that's what makes it one of the classic rivalries in the country, and we're the 12th oldest in the country, so it's very unique. And like I say, the symbol itself is just phenomenal. It's just, if we were to ring it right here, and you could just feel the tradition and the bell. I mean, it's just awesome. And you can't realize that the bell was that large on those Monon trail lines, Monon Railroad. It's unbelievable. It's really a great symbol.
Do you have anything to say to the Wabash players who lost the game 4 years in a row? Any sentiments or feelings towards them?
Well, I'm sure that Wabash, the feeling of any team, and if Wabash has lost it 4 years in a row, I'm sure they have a bad feeling. It is a really bad feeling, and I'm sure the 5th year there's going to be some great intensity in that ball game, and normally it is. And I will say this, that in the contest in my 23 years, and including the 3 since I retired, that there was only 1 year where there was a scuffle between 2 players that were ejected from the ball game. So it tells you it's a very intense, And I mean, you could cut the intensity with a knife that day. And hard-hitting contest, and yet it's a very clean ball game, and there's great respect, you know, between the two schools, and also the coaches. You know, you want to beat them on that particular day, but out of season, you do have a relationship with them, and it's, you know, it's friendly from that standpoint. But on game day, you know, they're the enemy, so to speak, and it's a lot of fun.
I bet it's hard hitting.
It is.
Let's see. I know we kind of covered this, but how I heard it doesn't matter your record before going into the game.
I think I covered it, right? Because we talked about 50.
It's about 50-50 on the 50-50 on
Do you use the bell? Do you use the bell game as a recruiting tool for DePauw? Do you recruit?
well, when you do we use a bell in the recruiting process? We just try to mention the intense rivalry, and it is a fun game. And I always told the recruits that you can take your big rivalry in high school, magnify it about 4 times, and that's the intensity you have in this ball game. And it's a lot of fun, and you know, I always mention that to them, and that they would really enjoy participating in the game.
And how do you describe Greencastle and DePauw to recruits? The Greencastle community. How do you?
Well, number one, when you had that question in there about that, what do I think about the Greencastle community? I always told the recruits, and I really believe this, that it's in a great location. The community, you're friends with everyone as far as Greencastle is concerned. And like I say, it's a small town atmosphere, but we're only 1 hour from Purdue. We're 1 hour from Indiana University, 1 hour, less than that, from downtown Indianapolis, and 45 minutes from Terre Haute. So we're in a great location from that standpoint. And I truly love it here. I know that when I was in the Big Ten, 8 years at Indiana, 8 at Northwestern. When I was at eight years at Northwestern, we got hired and fired twice there. Okay, our staff got hired and fired twice. And I said, this is it. I got to find me a Division III school so I can settle down. And the best thing ever happened to me was coming here to DePauw. It's a great university. And I remember after the first year, we went 9-1. And some Board of Trustee member asked me, what were my plans on going on? I said, well, you know, I didn't look at DePauw as a springboard to anywhere. I looked at it as a landing spot for me, and I truly did enjoy it here, and the community's fantastic. And we used to have an IBM plant that was here for many, many years, and they closed the plant in 1980, I forget, the mid-80s. 1986. I was going to mention 1986, and then 5 years after that, because of our economic recovery, bringing in I forget 6 or 8 plants, and the economic recovery, we were declared an all-American city. So you probably have that covered somewhere else anyway, right, John?
Yeah,
you probably have that covered.
I hear you say.
But I just do love the community, and you know, why do I stay here? I'm right on the golf course. I enjoy playing with friends in the community, playing golf, and my son and daughter are only an hour away in Indianapolis, one in Indianapolis, one in Carmel. So it's a perfect location as far as my wife and I are concerned.
Could you tell us, and feel free to tell us anything, Coach Nick's stories? I've heard there a lot of Coach Nick
Okay,
stories
Coach
out
Nick
there.
stories. One was a powertrain that you read in the paper. We used to do powertrains, and the powertrain involved, you had in the corner of the practice field, the 100-yard field, you had like an offensive player group, let's say the defensive backs, and opposite the defensive backs were receivers. And then you'd have offensive linemen and defensive linemen. So let's say the offense was up. If the offense was up, you blew a whistle and they jogged around the width of the field. Okay, they had to do it in so many seconds. Well, the other team was stationary, but they were doing exercises. So then when that was over, then the team that ran did the exercise, and the other team stood up and they went around. They had to go at a pretty good clip. You had to really push the linemen. They weren't real fast at it. And so when you did that one time, that's one power train. And so they accused me of some years of forgetting the number of power trains that we did. And then the following year, some player came to me whose father, I guess, was a farmer, and he had a power train on the hat. And so I wore that hat when we did the power trains on days, and we did it in the beginning of the year for conditioning primarily. We didn't do it during the year. And but the players used to hate it, but it was they always talk about the power trains. And then I think sometimes the young men will remind me about the time that I would wear a wig and break the intensity. And other times I have, they're out there practicing doing their calisthenics. I'd sneak in here and put a uniform on with a helmet and everything, go out there, run out there and play around with them, give them high fives. And they used to laugh like mad at that, but that's one of the things I used to do because, college football is fun. You got to enjoy it. And, and being a coach, I was a coach. I wanted to be a coach since the 7th grade. When that 4th grade teacher asked me when I was in 7th grade to come down and coach her 4th grade basketball team, I knew what I wanted from that day on. And I tell our players that you got to find a job that's like a hobby to you. And if you do, then you'll never have to work a day in your life. And that's the way I feel. In fact, I still feel that. In fact, I still do my kicking camp in the summertime. I love to do that. I've given clinic talks on kicking and punting to the National Football Coaches Convention, a yearly convention in January. I've done that twice. I've given a lot of clinic talks. I'm in the process now of writing the book on kicking, the science of kicking and punting. And I'm going to give a lecture this March 17th at the high school clinic on the science of quarterbacking, in my last lecture. And I'm going to go through the techniques of throwing a football, and I assure you that the two best are Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. And at the end of my clinic talk, I had our university film that game, make a copy of that game. And so I'm going through it. I'm in the process now of going through it and giving the coaches at the end of the clinic shots of Manning and Peyton who show the perfect form that I've always taught. And one of the key things, I have 30 hours beyond a master's degree called a director's degree that I got in the Hyper School of Indiana University. And I remember vividly the course that I took from John Cooper, Dr. John Cooper, on human movement was fantastic. Out of the 10 courses I took, 7 of them made me become a better coach. And I'm really, I just love to teach the correct throwing motion. And there is a correct throwing motion. There are fundamentals and athletic skills that carry over. Even a tennis player, when the tennis player serves, they'll tuck their arm to get a high vertical maximum power stroke on their serve. And that's the same thing you do in football. You just tuck your left arm and come over the top. And there are some pro players who'll stand there with their head perfectly still and try and throw a football. When you try and throw a football, you see you don't have a very high release. You got a low release here. So you got to tuck that head out of the way and get the head out of the way and tuck the arm so you got a high release. And that is so true. And there are fundamentals in any sport or any physical activity and any athletic activity that carries over. And you got to do them. It's like shooting a basketball. You can't shoot a basketball. I want to write a letter to Tinsley over there in the Pacers. You can't shoot a basketball with your elbow out here. Your elbow has to be underneath it. That's how you get accuracy, and there's no question. I don't care if you're shooting foul shots. I made 17 straight foul shots in a high school game, and it's because that high school coach taught me my fundamentals, and I was coachable. And I say you got to be coachable. If you're coachable, then you can learn as much as you want to learn. And I tell the young men, and some kids come to camp, and those that really listen, pay attention, they can become as good as they want to become, as long as they're coachable and they practice the correct fundamentals and techniques. Okay. I gave you a little bit of my history here. What you laughing at, Jen? That's true. That's true. I love it. I tell you, I love it. There's nothing I was born to be a coach. I just love it. I still do. I go to the Colts game. I've written a letter to Vanderjack. I even wrote a letter, believe it or not. I shouldn't even say that. I wrote a letter to Adam Vinatieri. I've lost ball games when the kicker kicks off and he penetrates too deep, he misses a tackle, boom, the guy's gone. And I set a rule that when you kick off, you don't cross the 50 or 45-yard line. You act like a safety man, and that's what you are. You're the last line of defense. So you attack it and corral him and keep him from cutting back. If he does cut back, your teammate will tackle him. And of course, Vinatieri against New England, I think it was, missed it. No, was it New England? Who was it? No, in New England, missed a tackle on a 33-yard line because he was too deep. But anyway, I wrote him a letter. He did improve it, but he still missed the tackle. He missed the tackle on the guy. He did stay back against in the last game. I don't know if he read my letter in time for the Super Bowl or not, but he did stay back. And I go to games. I even time the hang time on the kickoffs. The kickoffs in the pros are from the 30-yard line. This year, they're going to pass it March 12th. I'm pretty sure they'll pass it. That the kickoffs in college will go from the 30-yard line. And so you really have, then there's a technique, there's a science to kicking off. And in fact, I wrote an article on it. And there really is, to get maximum power, maximum hit, so you can drive the ball down the goal line. Because if you don't, there's going to be a lot of returns in college football this year. You watch. Because unless you have a kicker that kicks at the end zone, it's going to be tough.
A quick personal question. What are your feelings on Mike Vanderjack?
Mike Vanderjack has, technique-wise, he's a very good kicker, but he is not a good team person. You know what I mean? He's an individualist a little too much, and he's not. A kicker has to become a part of a team. You got to make an effort to be considered a player on a team. Vinatieri is that type of a person, but Vanderjack has a different type of personality. He's an individualist. There's no question. He's has a little cocky from that standpoint. But I don't know if he caused some losses or not. But I think that the Colts would have won 2 Super Bowls in a row. This would have been their second one if last year against the Pittsburgh Steelers, because the Pittsburgh Steelers went all the way, in the second quarter, the Colts scored a touchdown over the left tackle, Terry Glenn. But he was in motion, so we had to settle for a field goal. And I told my son, I said, that's going to come back and haunt us. If we score a touchdown, he's not in motion, that's 4 extra points, we win the game. They talk about the end play there where Harper picks up that ball and goes, but really it was decided in the second quarter. And they could, because Steelers went all the way, I know they could have gone all the way, but now they have to go for 2 next year, which I think they can do because they got the great people coming back, great players coming back.
I guess on the NFL.
Oh, by the way, I got to mention this. When I was accused of stealing signals and it got in the paper, Tom Moore, who's the offensive coordinator, I coached against him when I was at Northwestern. He was at Minnesota. He called me on the phone and laughed like mad because he knows that even in pros, I mean, they try to steal signals. That's why the coaches will cover their face as they talk they mention the play to the quarterback. Say, okay, I want pro right 36. You can't read my lips because I'm sure there's someone hiring someone to read their lips. I mean, you always steal signals. That's what you try to do in baseball and everything. You try to steal signals. But anyway, he laughed like mad. I'll never forget that.
On the NFL kick, now that we're on the topic, how was the Super Bowl? And I understand you went with one of your former players to help.
No, I didn't go to the game. Here's what happened. I wanted to go to the game because I know it's the Colts and maybe the Bears. And at the Bears, Rob Boris, who's a former player here, who was an outstanding. He's a very bright young man. Someday he'll be a head coach. And Pat Roberts, who's a Cleveland Browns college scout, will someday be a general manager, and they'll probably hire him. But basically, I wanted to go to I've never been to the Super Bowl. So I started making calls. The first call was to Rob Boris. And then I proceeded to call, and you know, he's a tight end coach with the Bears, and he's really sharp. As a freshman, he got hurt in the second game, and he starts as a freshman, and he knew every assignment on the line of scrimmage from tackle to tackle, which is phenomenal, because he had a lot of pride. But anyway, and then I proceeded to call officials and everything. I didn't, you know, so I made about 18, 20 calls. And my wife said, you should call Rob back. And I didn't want to call Rob because he, you know, he's got his family to worry about and what have you. And, but anyway, Friday night before the game, week before the game, he says, I got a ticket for you. Man, I was excited because I gave up. About 8:30, 9 o'clock, I gave up. I said, we're going to be watching on TV. And he calls about 9:15, which is 8:15 their time. And he says he has a ticket. And you know, I paid for the ticket, but I was glad to get it because he was offered, he said, I got many calls of people that says, I'll give you $5,000 for a ticket. And right before the game down there where I went to game, it was phenomenal. There was a person that had 2 tickets, $5,000 apiece, right before the game time. He figured he'd get it. But, and I went to the game. It was a phenomenal experience. Of course, since the Bears got me the ticket, I had a Bears hat on, and I bought a Bears shirt. I should have split the shirt, half Colts and half, but I didn't. I had a Bears outfit on because that's how I got the ticket. But then the next day, I put on a Colts outfit, I'd say, but I don't want to tell Rob that. But anyway, I really enjoyed it. And my wife and I flew down to Tampa, and then we stayed with friends, and then I drove down to the game and came back. And I came back, I said, I'm going to frame this. I said, and I was really worried about a parking spot, by the way, parking ticket. So I framed the ticket, $600 there, and I framed the parking pass. The parking pass was $50. And I put for February 4th, February 4th, 2007, ticket cost $600, a parking pass $50. I was never so happy to pay $50 in all my life, because when I pulled in there and I could see the stadium, I was in. That's all I cared about. And then Colts 29, Bears 17. Colts World Championship equals priceless. So that's what I got that framed. But it's really great. I really enjoyed the experience, and I thank Robbie for the ticket. But and I sat through the whole thing, and I was just I was wet, but I took a lot of pictures, and I really enjoyed it. And it's a great experience to see one time. And I was just amazed at the number of people that went to that game that didn't have a ticket. Just amazed. And they went there for the experience, because they have that NFL experience beforehand that's open all week long, that they have games and participation. And boy, they pay, you know, parking pass $50, a little small hot dog $5, bottle of water $5, a glass of beer, a cup of beer $10. I mean, but anyway, that's the NFL experience, I guess. But it was well worth it. I loved it.
How do you enjoy, or how do you feel about your player-coach relationship with present players and alumni? Because you got the ticket from a former player. Like, how's your relationship with players?
My relationship with the former players, I have great pride in them. I have all the captain's pictures in my office at home, and I'm in the process of getting all the senior pictures. I can't get some of the senior pictures in the past, but I always enjoy it. And quite often the players that get back, and you know, I always see them at games. And then since retirement, I also go, because we have a lot of coaches out there. I came from Miami, Ohio, La Cradle coaches. I have what we're trying to start here, and I've started the Tiger Den of coaches, and we have quite a few coaches out there. And we have 3 young former players who are in pro scouting. As I mentioned, Pat Roberts, who used to be with the Bears, that's where I got my Bears hat. And then Jonathan Stiegels with the Philadelphia Eagles. And then Joe Shane is with the Carolina Panthers. And now we have Rob Boris, who at the age of 33 got in the NFL. He's 36 and he went to Super Bowl. I mean, you can't beat that. That's outstanding. But we also go to former players like Jeff Voris at Butler. We go to watch his games. We traveled over to Iowa and see Grinnell, two former players there at Augustana College in Illinois. When we go out to Iowa, and then Jeff McMartin, who was an offensive coordinator, is the head coach at Central College. We've gone that. And then weekends, I go to a high school game on Friday night, college game on Saturday, and a pro game on Sunday. You can't beat that. That's a little too much, but thank goodness my wife enjoys football. She won't go to those Friday night games if it's raining, but I really enjoy watching football. And I see a lot of former players, so that's always fun. And quite a few of them are very, very successful, of course. And in fact, we took one trip to California this year, and we went to Napa Valley. And a young man who was a captain in my 1981 season is the president of Trinchero Winery. And we went out there and visited with him. He's become the president and CEO in the last 2 years. He worked with them 10 years, and the family made him the president and CEO. So, and then that was in Napa Valley. We stayed there 2 days, then went down to Stanford, where Tucker Wall, a former player, was coaching. So we watched the Stanford game. We stayed at Stanford and watched that game. My daughter and her husband, my wife and I, so the four of us, we really enjoyed that. So I enjoyed going to different games. I saw the college, I saw the largest cocktail party in the world was the Florida-Georgia game, played in Jacksonville, Florida. 84,000 people, split right down the middle, 42,000 in, their colors, red and white and blue and orange. So it was really unbelievable.
Can you think of any more Monon Bell stories that you'd like to tell, or any Coach Nicks, or just any stories?
I told you about the accusation. I covered that one.
I got one for you, Coach. If you can, compare a small school versus like a Big Ten or Ivy League school in terms of the sports program.
Normally, when a young man, you comparing DePauw University's atmosphere in athletics versus a Big Ten school. Number one, when you come to a smaller atmosphere, the young men here, a good academic school, are coming here, number one, to get an education, and secondly, an opportunity to play football, and or to play their sport. And we have a lot of good athletic teams here. We've won the All-Sports Trophy in our conference, and our two basketball teams have this year gone to the playoffs, men and women's basketball teams. And so when they come here, and they all, vast majority, a high percentage graduate in 4 years. I mean, it's really, you could almost say 100%. And there's some teams that average over a 3-point average on their team. I mean, our average, we had more numbers, of course, we had 100 and some, but we were average about a 291 or 295, but there's some athletic teams that average higher, but they'll graduate here in 4 years. Versus a bigger school, they have you there for a year and they redshirt you, and then you go 4 more years of athletic eligibility. And so now occasionally they have to play the freshmen, so it only has 4 years at that level. But quite a few of the big schools, the players go on and get a professional contract and they don't finish their degree. But that's a big difference between the two. But I've had players here that technique-wise, I'm no lineman that might be 6 foot 235, that if they were 6'4", 280, they could have played anywhere in the country. And then sometimes we'll get a fast young man who benches 400 pounds. He's only 5'7" and 180 pounds, and he's real quick, but he's too small to play in a bigger, larger, level of competition. And but the idea is to be out there playing and participating, and that's why you have quite a few kids come here, and they come here to, number one, the opportunity to play the game, and secondly, to get a great degree that will help them out later in life. And normally they're done in 4 years, and they go on, whether they become 40% of our students will go on to graduate school or go to professional school. So they go on and they're very successful.
How was the athletic experience, 4 years that discipline, you know, practice, game, wins, losses. How does that help a young man or a young lady in life later?
As an athletic team, participating on an athletic team help you in later in life, there's no question, because you learn about dedication, of practicing every day along with studying, okay? The discipline that's involved, and developing a lot of pride. And no matter what you do, pride's a personal commitment to excellence in anything that you do, and you want to participate at a high level. In a competition, you're going to get knocked down. You know, you're not going to have success every game, and there are going to be peaks and valleys just like there are in life, and you have to overcome those. So the discipline involved, the dedication, the hard work, the work ethic. You have to have a great work ethic, because you spend 15, 20 hours a week on the athletic field practicing and playing, and so you really have to be great in time management. But in the long run, those that participate certainly prepares them for later in life. And I think when you can budget your time doing that, you're going to be a success later in life on the work ethic that you're going to develop as an undergraduate player, and that's true in any athletic. If you're on any athletic team, I think it really helps you out. There's no question. It's just an added activity, an added participation, because sometimes in the heat of the contest, you got to make a decision, an important one. You got to make the right decisions most of the time, and you're thinking on the move physically. And sometimes it helps you in making great decisions in the heat of the competition that might help you when you have to make a big decision right there in the courtroom, or when you're operating on someone. And as I told him, I said, I want to make sure that you know what you're doing. When I had heart bypass in 1984, and I'm still going on the same bypass, I said, that doctor did a great job on me, I'm going to tell you that. And I want you to make sure that you make the right stitches in every operation that you do, and that type of thing. So there's really great carryover, and we always emphasize that there's a great carryover in participating in an athletic sport.
I actually have a few more. One quick one, going back to one of the earlier things you said, with Wabash and DePauw. Is Wabash an all-male school? And you mentioned something about girlfriends going to DePauw.
Well, there are some girlfriends, right there. Well, I don't know how do you say that, but Wabash, I think, is probably the only school left that's an all-boys school. There used to be two, but I think they're the only school. In fact, I think a president one time tried to make it coeducational, and he wasn't there very long. So they liked their stigma of being the only boys' school in the country. And sometimes there may be teammates that go to two different schools of rivalry. Sometimes their girlfriends might come here, or they may develop a girlfriend here by coming down here at some parties, or they invite young women up to their campus on parties up there. So there is some interaction from that standpoint, the men and women, as far as girlfriends are concerned. Is that what you wanted to give?
Yeah, I just wondered.
Come on, Jen. I see Jen back there laughing. Come on, Jen.
I just remembered. Your odds would be pretty. Your odds would be pretty good up there. Let's see, the SI cover. I don't think you mentioned that yet.
Sports Illustrated.
Uh-huh.
Going as far as coverage of the game, I mentioned that in the past 20 years, well, not past 20 years, but it's 20 years we've had TV coverage of the game. In the 100th year, we had coverage in the Sports Illustrated on the 100th year. Then the following year, ESPN covered our game. And then going back in 1977, I think, Charles Carrot had a show, and he did mention the 1933 team, the men that raised $2 million in honor of their coach, Gami Neal, and named the Gami Neal Fieldhouse after him, and how successful that 1933 team was. The 1933 team was undefeated and unscored upon that year, but the funny thing about it, they had 2 or 3 games a year before and a year after that they were undefeated. So they had a big span in there. They were undefeated and unscored upon, which is phenomenal. That wouldn't happen in modern era for a whole season. There's no way. And so there was a lot of history there. And the Charles Carrot show covering the 33 football team, and it was a special program.
Let's see. Marvin's.
What now?
Marvin's. Marvin's a restaurant you want to...
Well, you know, I mentioned Marvin's. Marvin was a famous eating place right next to campus. When I first got here, it was just like a shack, so to speak, but it was on Friday and Saturday night. They were lined up out on the sidewalk waiting to get in, and they're known for their famous garlic cheeseburgers, and it's famous even in the community. If you go up there at noontime, and even in the evenings, you'll see community people go in there also. And when the players come back, they want to go there to eat versus anywhere else. I mean, and they always run specials, of course. And Marvin's did try to open up down at IU, but I don't think that went too well. But there is a college up in Wisconsin where there's a Marvin's up there. And Marvin is retired and it's taken over by the Sullivans, Mike Sullivan, and now his son Kevin Sullivan has taken it over. And it's really a famous place, and they'll have all the the dinner dances, or the dances where they have pictures. There's pictures of all the quite a few men and women on campus. Their picture is in there, and then finally you'll see pictures of Marvin's delivers when students go to Europe or wherever they go. They always make a sign, Marvin's delivers here, and they'll put it in front of their picture, and there's quite a few pictures on the wall up there, and there's some athletic pictures up there too. But it is a famous place in the community, and like I say, you'll find a lot of our community members go in there for lunch and dinner. And on Friday and Saturday night, it's really a special place, and a lot of people, they deliver, so a lot of students will order late in the evenings, sandwiches, etc.
I know that's something that I do all the time, order. The NACDA, can you tell us
Okay,
about that?
my honor society.
Uh-huh.
In 1996 on, pardon me, I'll start again. The honor society that I founded, in 1996 on sabbatical, I founded the National College Athlete Honor Society. It honored, it's Chi Alpha Sigma, College Athletic Society. And Chi Alpha Sigma is the way I named it. And it's academic and athletic excellence is a motto. And it's for any junior or senior. It's like the Phi Beta Kappa in the athletic world. You only can get in your junior and senior year if you have achieved a 3-point accumulative average, okay? And you have to have earned a letter in your sport. And it's for both men and women. And my wife does most of the work, and is getting. We're hoping that the National Association Directors of College Athletics will take it over. The National Association of College Directors of Athletics, NACDA, will take it over. They said they would, and unless we find funding so we can keep it at Greencastle and DePauw University where it was founded. We have we're approaching 150 schools. We're at about 147 schools in 36 states. So, and the idea came to me when I'm watching our plays done here at DePauw University, where they had a National Honor Society in theater. And I said, well, we should have a National Honor Society in athletics. And it's like the Phi Beta Kappa in the athletic world. And then we went to Association of College Honor Societies, okay? And that was in East Lansing. And there are 66 honor societies, and this is the only one in athletics. You know, they got honor society in economics, mathematics, English, et cetera, et cetera. And there are 66 of them. So we're the only one in athletics, and it's, I really think it's a great thing for the students that achieve at a 3.4 or above and participate in athletics 15, 20 hours a week, and still keep their academics at that average. They deserve something special, and it's great for their resume. And I really take great pride in it, and I just, being the founder. But like I say, my wife, she's a vice president or a vice founder because she's doing all the work there. So we're, in our retirement, we're trying to find funding. If not, NACTA will take it over.
Anything else?
That's,
Coach,
that's quite a bit.
is there anything else that we haven't asked you that you'd like to?
No, that's basically it. I could have maybe talked more about the university, but you'll get that anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, because our academic and athletic facilities are superior, are really outstanding.
You watch WTIU?
Pardon me?
Do you watch our station, WTIU?
Yes.
Yeah.
I hope we take. I don't know where it is. There you go.
Yeah, thanks again for.
And then I gave you that because the words of the ballad are in.
So that's all the seniors that are on there, or what?
No, the whole team.
The whole team, okay. Earn a degree is number one, huh? Number 4 on the program goal is beat Wabash.
I want to either find a sponsor or turn it over, because we got like about almost 150 schools in 36 states without soliciting all of them, by word of mouth. So it's, we got we have Auburn, Florida, LSU, Nebraska, Wisconsin.
First off, you start and state your name and what your position was with DePauw University.
Okay, my name is Nick Mourouzis, and I'm retired now, but I was a head football coach and professor of health and physical performance.
All right.
Actually, it should be kinesiology. They changed that. Okay.
Right. Modern terminology, can't pronounce it.
Kinesiology. They changed it. I said, you know, they changed it. I said, I was mad at the director to change it. And I said, it took me a couple months to learn how to spell it.
All right, you'd be looking at Jeff too.
Do I look at Jeff, right?
Yeah, thanks.
Start again.
First question, the Monon Bell game.
Wait, get me again on my name.
Okay.
Okay, my name is Nick Mourouzis, and I retired 3 years ago from DePauw University as a head football coach. I was a head football coach for 23 years and a professor of kinesiology.
The Monon Bell game, what is it for people who don't know?
Well, it's just an intense college football rivalry. Okay.
Can you try to put the question?
Oh, okay, yeah. For people who don't know about the Monon Bell rivalry, it's a very intense and competitive intercollegiate football game between two schools that are just 28 miles apart. And it really is very competitive, and the student body really gets involved in both student bodies, and even the faculty and administration and the communities also.
All right. Could you give us a general history behind the Bell game?
The history of the Monon Bell game goes back to 1890, when the schools first started to compete. And in 1932, an alumnus by the name of Orion Pfeiffer recommended in a letter to the Indianapolis News that they should use the Monon Bell from the Monon rail lines as a symbol of the rivalry. And they did start it, and he, I think, wrote the letter in '87, and they did start it in 1932. And with the Bell, you know, it's very competitive. The one thing that makes the rivalry so intense is that you have a closeness of scores each year, and you have a closeness in wins and losses. And it's just phenomenal. And like I say, it's supposedly the 12th oldest rivalry west of the Alleghenies, although I think there's another one between Albion and Olivet that's a little older, but we used to say that it was the oldest rivalry west of the Alleghenies. And it's the 12th oldest in the country.
Is it a friendly rivalry between the schools and the communities?
Well, you can say it's very friendly. There's great respect for one another, great respect for the two communities and the schools. And really the game itself is very competitive. You think there'd be a lot of fights, but there weren't. We've only had one in my 23 years where two guys got in a scuffle and they kicked them out of the game. But other than that, it's very competitive, and like I say, they have great respect for one another. The two schools are outstanding academic schools, and I think the communities do get involved. You can see advertisements out on billboards, say, good luck, beat Wabash, and in the business, on their business signs or in their windows, the business windows. So it's, the communities do get involved, but the rivalry is basically between the two schools, and it's very intense.
Is there a bridge that comes into town?
Is there a what, John?
There's a bridge that comes into town that gets painted by...
Yeah, oh yeah, the art. Okay, as far as the rivalry is concerned, each school will sometimes paint signs or leave their mark, so to speak. And the one railroad arc bridge, the donut hole we call it, they always used to, Wall-Base used to come down there and paint a big red W on it every year. And, but there was always some little form of destruction. One year, not destruction, but just to leave their mark, I shouldn't say it that way. But one year we were raising money by smashing a car right there in the main center of campus. And you know, you got a chance to put a dent in the car to raise money. And they found out about it, but they came down and put the car on fire. I couldn't believe it, but anyway. And then one other time, once they came to our house and at night, and they really literally not burned it, but put a W with grass killer on there. And my daughter woke up in the morning and said, "Look, Mom, they put an M in there," because she's looking at it from the other direction. But they have done it right in our yard, and we had to get it replaced and did send them the bill, and they did pay for it. So any destruction, I know that the other school is very concerned about that. They don't want destruction, but it's a friendly rivalry. It's very intense, but as you can see, there are a lot of little games that are played with it. Side games, I should say.
Let's see, what is the current record between the two teams?
Well, the current record between the two teams is 50, wait a minute, I got to recheck this here, 53, 52, and 9. Okay, the record between the two teams right now stands as 53 wins for Wall-Base, 52 for DePauw, and 9 ties. Now, there aren't any ties anymore since that rule was passed. There are no ties in football games. You go into overtime. And since the bell as a symbol since 1932, DePauw leads the series, 35 wins, 34 losses, and 6 ties.
Let's see. Why has this game become one of the best and most passionate rivalries in all of college sports?
Well, number one, it has become a big rivalry basically between the two schools. The closeness of the two schools, number one, 28 miles apart. The second thing, kids come from high school and, you know, the men would go to Wall-Base and students, whether girlfriends or cousins or what have you, would come to DePauw, and so that rivalry starts then. And then it continues on into the alumni. And in fact, it is, the game has been televised 20 times, okay? And HDNet is the last one to televise it. And I lost my train of thought there. Dog it.
What's the question?
Why has this game become one of the best and most passionate rivalries in all of college sports?
Okay. Okay, here we go. Should I do it again? Do it again.
Okay. You just go ahead.
Why it's become such a big rivalry, number one, intense rivalry, is because of closeness of the schools. The student body have known, a lot of them have known each other from high school. And there's cousins that may go to different schools, okay? And even in fact, the faculty and administration, I think the vast majority of them do attend a game. And then it is so intense that it continues on into alumni groups. And in fact, last year, the game was televised into 53 cities across the country, from the East Coast to the West Coast and south of Florida. And where the alumni from both schools will come together and watch the game in a neutral, site. So it's just intense rivalry, and I'm sure there's some wagers on the game from the alums and what have you. And those, the other thing is that former players from both schools, quite a few of them come back to campuses to be in attendance of that ball game. There's no question. There's a lot of tailgating that goes on. And so, and then the other thing is they do have an alumni football game between the two schools on Saturday morning. And there's also an intramural football game between the two schools on Friday.
Do you think the game is more passionate between alumni than students, or? vice versa?
Well, the students are right there involved in, the intensity of the ball game and the attendance, and the alumni carry it on because those students become alumni. But I'm going to mention this, that when I first got here, in the opening game, we had like 12,000 people here, and 10, 12,000, they didn't know the exact number, because there were like 6 or 8 deep around the field, which is phenomenal. And there were people on top of the field house, they were up in limbs of trees so they could get a view on top, everything, so they could get a view of the game. And it was really intense. In fact, there were a lot of fights that broke out, not between the players. Like I told you, we only had one scuffle where 2 players were kicked out in my 23 years here. In fact, including the last 3 since I retired. And but the fans, sometimes they might have been having too much alcohol and getting fights, and it got really nasty. And we've changed a lot on the history to make the game more safe, to prevent that type of thing now. In fact, both schools now have gotten together to really clean it up from that standpoint. They limit the number of people that can come to the game. You have to have a ticket to get in. For the number of seats, they have the field surrounded with a fence, and everyone has to be sitting up in, they have to be behind the fence and sitting in the stands. And the other thing is, we used to have the bell, the team that had possession of the bell was at the back of the bench, or in the bench area. So if you won the game, not a problem. But if you lost the game, the other team would come in mass and just go toward the bell, and there maybe been a few collisions there. But we have solved that problem, because if you have the ball possession, it stays there till the end of the 3rd quarter. At the end of the 3rd quarter, it goes to a neutral site. Here at DePauw, it's in the north end zone. And then at the end of the game, we also come together and shake hands in the middle of the field before we go retrieve the ball. So every year, whether you win or lose, it's the idea, if you have possession of the ball, you're still going to go retrieve it again. And so we've really, the 2 universities, administration, athletic administration, and administration in general, from the president on down, have made the game much more, less conflicts at the end of the game as far as fights are concerned and that type of thing. And any confrontation, we just eliminated confrontation. And it really was a good thing for us to do, because before it used to be rather nasty. And like I say, in the first game, my first year, was unbelievable. There were like 6 or 8 deep around the field, and they were right next to the field. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Let's see. I guess, is this the best college rivalry in sports, in your opinion? Why? I know you kind of just answered that. So, let's see. Briefly, why was the Monon Bell chosen as a trophy? Can you tell us like a little bit how much it weighs, what it looks like, just kind of general bell information?
When was a bell chosen, and the weight of it? Number one, it was started in 1932 on a suggestion from an alum who wrote a letter to the Indianapolis News, and the Monon Railroad lines gave us the bell, and there's fluctuations between anywhere 250 to 350 pounds, and actually the bell itself weighs 258 pounds. We weighed it one time there before I retired, and then but with a metal carriage to it, because you had a cross to carry it, and it took 4 people to carry it because it was so heavy. And if you were to see the bell and ring it, you could just feel the tradition. I mean, it's just, I consider it the greatest symbol of any rivalry in the country. And because there's a bell, I mean, we had the Oaken bucket at Indiana, it's a little bucket that size. And I heard about the DePauw game when I was at Indiana. But this Indiana was voted just recently in 2005 as the best rivalry in the state of Indiana. And so that gives you an idea of the, well, since we've had the bell. And it is a great symbol of a rivalry. It's, as I said, I've always said it's the greatest symbol of any rivalry in the country.
Let's see. What does this game mean to both DePauw University and the Greencastle community?
What does the Monon Bell game mean to the DePauw community and the Greencastle community? Number one, because of the rivalry, I think most of those that are football fans and quite a few of the businesses do put up signs, and as far as beating Wabash, the week of the game coming up for the intensity. And I think the students, of course, the size of the town are very involved. You know, the town is roughly right around 10,000 people. We got 2,300 students, and so the closeness of the community, I think the Greencastle community really looks forward to the game. I know there are a lot of friends I have in the community that like to attend that ball game and watch it. I mean, there are barbers in town that will take time off to go watch that game versus all the other games.
Do you think it's kind of a point of pride for some of the Greencastle residents that such a big game is in their community, or?
You know, I think it is a point of pride for the community people, because the game is, you know, it's like nationally televised. It goes you know, clear across the country, and to see those television cameras come into town is, you know, I think is something special that the community takes pride in, and you know, their involvement in hosting that type of a ball game with that intense rivalry. And it is really something to see, I assure you.
What's the general atmosphere like around game time? I guess if you want to answer that one, between the students and the Greencastle community.
Well, normally we have some things that get involved basically between the schools. We have a pep rally normally called the Ring Sing on Wednesday that the sororities and fraternities get together to raise money for you know, community projects for the United Way drives. But they're also, I lost my train of thought there. Give me that again.
Let's see, what was it here? The atmosphere like around town and campus before and during the game.
The atmosphere around town and on campus before the game, I think the community realizes what goes on, because we do compete against each other on raising money for you know, different community programs. For example, we have a blood drive between the two schools, and to see who raises the most blood, and there's competition from the standpoint of the debate teams from two schools, and they also have concerts, singing of both schools, like on Friday evenings, I know, and those things lead up to the rivalry and the interest in the school and in the community of Greencastle.
Do the football players and you yourself around game time feel kind of like the big man on campus, or how do you guys like the
No,
attention?
basically, how do we feel about it before game time? You know, some coaches approach it as just being another game, which they do that so they don't put too much emphasis and put pressure on the players. But if you don't even mention a game, during the week it's a very intense practice. And really the team is concerned. They know their student bodies behind them competing against Wabash. But basically, there's an intensity during the week, and I consider it, an important game. I always said it's a season in itself, because if you lost the game, I'll tell you, it stays with you a long time. I mean, it takes me 2 or 3 months to get over it, and you always remember it until the next time you play. And so the desire to win the game is really there. And the players, you don't have to say too much. In fact, the intenseness of the game and, before the ball game is so intense. Let's say that we're loading the 2 buses and 3 or 4 vans that take the team up, and they're very intense. It's very quiet. And I've done things to, actually release the pressure. And in fact, if they're all loaded in there, I'd run in here and I'd grab a hair wig and go back out there, put my head in each bus and each van, and they'd start laughing like mad. And some of the players remember that. I mean, I remember I doing that in 1996 where we had lost the game 4 times, and we were previously, I think, but we were determined to win the game, and we were going to win it because our young men were fired up. But they were very intense before the game, and I remember relaxing them by doing that. And I know Bill Walsh used to dress up in a bellman's outfit before his team came up for a championship game. And then I've read also where Lombardi used to do something to lighten the team before a big crucial game. But the intensity is really there during the week for the players, and you have to be careful you don't get, what I say, too fired up or too intense where you don't perform at peak performance. I mean, you don't perform at your best. And so that's why some coaches don't push it as being a key game. But yet it's a key game. It's doesn't matter, just like the Oak and Bucket, they have bragging rights for a year. So if you win the Monon Bell game for a year, you have bragging rights, and you definitely want to win it. So it is an important game, more so than any others. And like I say it's a season in itself. And that may be putting too much pressure on it, but if you lose it, there's a bad feeling. I'm going to tell you that.
How does the community react to all the media and outside attention before the game day?
Tell me again, how does
The media react to all the attention or how does the community react to that media?
Well, there's always, in the local newspaper, of course, there's a lot of coverage for the game leading up to the game, as even the day before, the Indianapolis Star does cover the game leading up to it, and they definitely have coverage with a picture in there normally after the game, and all the media are involved. When you have the TV that's involved, they come to town and do some interviews before that they show at halftime or at certain periodically during the game, at timeouts and between quarters and then halftime. So there's always that type of involvement from the town can sense that it's being nationally televised, and they definitely have an interest in that.
And then who does the games have? Who's been broadcasting them? Because you said it's been done.
HDNet has done it 2 out of the last 3 years, and we've just signed a contract with them. It's not, they've agreed, I should say agreed, it's not signed completely, but they have agreed to televise it the next 3 years, so on HDNet. And like I say, it goes clear across the country to whoever wants to tune into it. But like I say, we've had 53, some years this past year, 53 cities where the alumni get together and watch the game from both schools. And it's really a lot of fun. I'm sure that I've never been to one of those parties, but you can just imagine those luncheons are a lot of fun to those alumni that are involved.
When is the first time you heard about the Bell game? And what's your first memory of the Bell game?
Okay, I first heard about the Bell game when I was at Indiana University, and would read about it. It's the rivalry, like I say, it was voted in 2005 as the best rivalry in the state, beating the Oak and Bucket, because I was familiar with the Oak and Bucket and participating with that. And It's you know, it is quite a game. And my first exposure to the game was in the very first season in 1981, when Wabash came to town with a 26-game winning streak. And they had big Pete Metzlars, who was about 6'8", 250 at that time, who was an All-American football and basketball player at Wabash. They came to town, and that was a game where there were people lined up around that field. I think they estimated at 12,000 people, but there were quite a few people here. And the game was just unbelievable. We were trailing in the first, right before the halftime, 14-7. We had 4th and 4 yards to go for a touchdown. Rather than kick a field goal, we decided to throw a pass, a fade route in the corner of the end zone from Robbie Doyle to Kevin Perkins, who caught the ball. So we went in at halftime with a little momentum, so we tied it. It was 14-14. We came out in the second half. We scored late in the third quarter. I can remember the play, 54-yard read to halfback from Robbie Doyle to Mark McConnell, and he scored, and that held up. And we shut Wabash out in the second half and beat them 21-14 after a 14-14 score at halftime. So I'll remember that forever. That was an outstanding game. And one other game that I remember was in the year 2000. We were down 17-9 with 7 minutes to go. But in a span of the last 7 minutes, 6 minutes there, we scored 3 touchdowns and ended up beating them 29-17, which was unbelievable. We missed a couple extra points there, I guess. But that was a great comeback in a short period of time. Now, on the other side, there are some disheartening ones also. I remember in 1986, we ran out of time. Our timeouts were used up, and we got beat 24-23. We were driving about the 20-yard line and didn't have enough time. We put our team out there, but the clock ran out before we had a chance to kick the field goal, and we lost 24-23. One other time, if you tie the ball game back then, and you had possession, you got to keep it for another year. And in the last 14 seconds, they kicked a field goal, and it hit the crossbar and went in. And they tied the game 17-17. And I'll never forget the young man's name, Alex Costa. I'll never forget it. Came jumping in front of our bench and just jumping up and down. And it was, you know, a bad feeling from our standpoint because we had a chance to win the ball game. And another time, well, it was my first year when Chris Creighton came down here in the year 2000, okay? My first time competing against Chris. We were behind, but then with less than that, with 9 seconds to go, anyway, we tied the ball game, 21-21. And then they had like 9 seconds to go, and they do the last play before the end of the game. I remember the quarterback scrambling and threw the ball high into the air from their side of the 50, but he couldn't throw it all the way to the end zone, so he threw it around the 10-yard line, and their big tight end went up to tip the ball. He misses the ball, it hits him on the helmet, glances off, and goes to the gentleman in the end zone. They score a touchdown and beat us. So we're very high, we've got momentum, we've just tied them, and then after that happens and the clock runs out, you just drop your head and you just can't believe it. So you go from a height of ecstasy to the lowest point that you can think of. It's really a bad feeling, I want to assure you that. So there's good and bad, great feelings when you win and bad ones when you lose.
I guess with that, tell us about how it feels after games and on bus rides home when you win a game and when you lose a game.
Well, the feeling after a ball game, coming back from Wabash on the bus, is it can be very emotionally high or very emotionally low, to tell you the truth. But you're coming back, it's rather quiet the whole way home. But if you win the game, I mean, they're singing and you know, chattering the whole way back, and everyone's excited because when we got back to campus, we would put the bell on a truck and drive around campus and ring the bell, okay, all over the campus and the community. And then at night, we had to stop doing this, but at night it used to go to fraternity, and there was a lot of noise going on, and you know, complaints about too noise early in the morning. But we used to put it to bed. We'd take the bell away from that fraternity at midnight, so they wouldn't be ringing at early hours of the morning. So that's a little history from that standpoint. And more recently, I think they ring it around campus and then they put it away. Okay, so that's the policy now since I've retired.
Can you tell us about your last run-on bell game?
Well, my last contest we were playing up there after 23 years here, and the players sensed that it was the last game, but I tried to tell them, you know, don't worry. From my standpoint, you play the game for yourselves and go out there and compete. But I felt that our players were trying too hard to win it for the old coach, and it shouldn't have been that way. And I tried to tell them that. And the quarterback throwing a ball into the dirt, you know, which he hadn't done all year. Players dropping passes, which he hadn't done. And us just not executing from the standpoint of blocking and tackling. We had one play where they scored a touchdown and we missed 9 tackles on that play, which you know, that's not our football. And so I think that's what happens, and that's what happened. And we did lose a game, I remember that. But I think my record over all those years is just like the record that currently exists. It's very balanced. I think I was, I forget, 11-11-1, I think, so 22, 23 years, so I was like 500.
It's pretty amazing to see the scores and the averages.
Well, right, it's amazing. And you can say also that there's really no advantage, a home field advantage, because it is also 50-50. Now the team going into the game, as far as the record is concerned, the team that has the better record has won about 61% of the games, but it's still rather close. So you can say that the field and the record, the home field advantage or the record doesn't mean anything going into that game, and that's very true. And so it goes down to whoever wants to win it the most, number one, and the team that makes the fewest mistakes. And it always comes down to any football game will come down, and certainly in the Monon Bell game, it'll come down to 4 or 5 key plays that you either execute or you don't execute to win the game or lose the game.
Let me change things here.
Okay.